and
keep everyone muted. There's too many people.
No, that's fine. So I'm Dara, and speaking is Donna, and you see Tom's picture in China. On behalf of Modern Mahjong and Mahjong community, we want to welcome you. Just a really quick housekeeping notes before we begin. I see a lot of faces and names of people that are in our current tournament, so keep on sending in your scores as you're playing. People have asked for a New Year's Eve, New Year's Day tournament, so that we are hosting. Registration's open, and look out for a code for discount on that. If you want to join us on our upcoming Zooms, our event tab on modernmahjong.com has the Zoom links. So if you're ever stuck to find the Zoom link last minute, if you go to modernmahjong.com on the event tab, you will find it. If you have any friends messaging you and saying, I can't get on, let them know that YouTube, we will share this on YouTube after. So we will keep monitoring the chat. Donna and I will keep scrolling down. If there's a question, and we can try to bring in questions as we go along, try to type them in all caps, because then that really stands out for us to notice. So now we would like to start our Zoom. For everybody who has been playing Mahjong and may have had a disagreement over a rule or wanted to learn the actual rule for something that you couldn't find out easily, you have probably our guest to thank for helping explain it through his amazing website, Sloperama.com. Many of you joining us tonight have been students of Tom Sloper's. For those of you that had enjoy the American Mahjong practice app that we used last week in our Charleston challenge, you may have met Ray Meyer. If it wasn't for Tom, we wouldn't have Mahjong practice app. Ray's son, is such a small world, was a student in one of Tom Sloper's classes. And when Ray found out that he was into Mahjong, he gave him an early prototype of the Mahjong practice app. And Ray really appreciated and said that Tom gave him such incredible advice about releasing it. So,
and Ray's on the call, by the way, so that's very cool. So if any of you follow us on Mahjong Community on Facebook, we featured Tom previously on our series called Men That Maj. So you can go back and read all about it back then. So Tom first started playing Mahjong in 1994. He was a video game designer and a producer at Activision. Present day, he's a senior lecturer at the University of Southern California. He is the creator of Sloperama website, who many of us has gone to for advice and knowledge. It really is an incredible resource for all of us. So, where did I lose it? He's also the author of a book on official Chinese and American Mahjong, The Red Dragon and the West Wind. We want to thank Tom for his time. And our first question is, please share more on your background if you can, Tom, and what drew you to the game and what caused you to write your book and start the website Sloperama.
Well, Donna covered it pretty well. I was working as a game designer and producer at Activision. And in 1991, there was a company upheaval. The company changed management, and I survived the process, and in that process inherited the Shanghai line of Mahjong tile matching games. So Mahjong tile matching, that went back to 1986, and this was 1991, so it was a 5-year-old franchise, and my job then was to create new versions and also to make versions of Shanghai for video game systems, as well as for PCs and stuff like that. I did a lot of work with Japanese game companies. I'm gonna show you, let's see, I have to move this thing out of the way. And I'm gonna show you some screenshots here.
And just to, while he's doing that, if anything is blocking the screenshot, you can actually click on the tabs and move it over. If you can't see something, if you see the little Brady Bunch of pictures, you could click and move that over.
So I'm hoping that now you can see a picture of me. This was taken like 20 years ago or something. That's me in Activision in Santa Monica. And then I made Shanghai Great Moments. And I made a Sega Genesis version of Shanghai 2 Dragon's Eye, Shanghai 2 Shanghai Second Dynasty includes American style Mahjong. Shanghai Double Pack was another one. Shanghai Dynasty had several kinds of real Mahjong, but not American. Shanghai Triple Threat. Here's me playing in China at a big tournament there. And again, and you can see I didn't have a beard then. I was featured a couple times in this Japanese Mahjong comic book from Japan, Kindai Mahjong it's called. And so they had articles about me a couple times, and the cartoon image of me that I use on my website is from this comic book. And so anyway, that was what I wanted to show you there.
Tom, just so you know that Marcia and Linda both said they still have working on an old PC, and Linda used to play Shanghai in her old system.
I didn't know, I don't know, you kind of broke up a little bit. I'm not sure what OPC is.
Oh, Marcia just said that she still has a working version of Second Dynasty on her old PC that she saved.
Oh,
Her old PC, yeah.
And Linda remembers playing Shanghai Mahjong in her old system.
yes, I just recently found out that Shanghai Second Dynasty will now work on Windows 10. It didn't work under Windows 7 or 8, but now it's working again. However, because the game is 21 years old now, Activision doesn't have the multiplayer servers up anymore. So it's strictly solo from this point. So that's how I got into Mahjong. It was through my work. And because I wanted to add real Mahjong, real 4-player Mahjong to the Shanghai series, that meant I had to learn to play 4-player Mahjong because I knew how to use the tile matching. So I got books, and none of them were helpful. They weren't telling me how to beat the games that I was trying to play on the Super Nintendo or the PlayStation 1 or what have you. I discovered that there are different kinds of Mahjong. Look at that, Shanghai Mahjong Essentials. Judy's holding it up there. So the thing was that I wanted to learn Japanese Mahjong. I didn't know there was a Japanese Mahjong, and I knew there was Chinese Mahjong. And then I started finding out there's all kinds of Mahjong, so I needed to learn them so I could figure out which ones I ought to include in Shanghai Second Dynasty, Shanghai Dynasty, and then Shanghai Second Dynasty. While I was working on all that stuff, back in those days, in the 90s, America Online was like the big hub of knowledge online. People would go to America Online to share information. And then it was Usenet, the news groups. And in 2000, I left Activision. And so I wanted to keep on maintaining the frequently asked questions. So the frequently asked questions that I'd written for the news group needed to go online. The news groups were no fun to use. Anyway, I finally set up my own website and put the FAQs on the website. And at first I called it thegameguru.net, but somebody then gave me the idea of sloperama.com. So I got that domain and went from there.
Yeah, the other day we saw someone call you sloperman.com. I think you
Sloperman. We need a comic book with a cape. Sloperman.
So you mentioning the frequently asked questions kind of leads us to our next question.
Okay.
When you're asked a question about strategy or about rules, what rules, what book, what to the back of the card, what order of things do you look at in order to answer one of those questions?
Well, if I don't have, well, I always want to put a link to the FAQ or a reference to the National Mahjong League's website. And so what I do then, let me do this. Let me go over to, well, let me share the screen. So here is Sloperama. And what I do is I click on this thing here, and that takes me to FAQ 19. And then I can, look for the question, and then somebody says, so somebody made a mistake and then she wanted to know what could she do? So then I'll click on here, and then I'll get the link, and then I'll go and say, well, you want to go to FAQ 19 AM, and then I can just paste this link into the reply. But also on each of these questions, there's a reference to Red Dragon and the West Wind, what rule number on what page, and also to where in the National Mahjong League's own documentation you can find the rule. So then I can just go and say, okay, well, that's on page 18 in the National Mahjong League rule book. Go look it up yourself. Of course, nobody has the rule book, so that doesn't work.
But it's so helpful, because when we get a question, I mean, the comment section in the peanut gallery could go back and forth even after a question's answered. So your Sloperama is so helpful that we could just cut and paste a site, a reference, and it's just definitive, and we, can move on from there.
Yeah.
So speaking of the importance of following rules, Donna and I really appreciate one rule. Every form of Mahjong, we realize, starts with rolling dice. And we love your example on Sloperama. Can you explain why rolling dice is important?
Well, you roll dice because that way you prevent cheating. And I know that as soon as I say, it prevents cheating, then everybody gets all huffy, and they're like, none of us cheat. We would never cheat, and we would never bring in anybody who would ever cheat. It never happens. Nobody cheats. Of course, I've been in tournaments where there was cheating, and in fact, I've got a story to tell about Denmark sometime later on, where basically the thing is, if you're just going to start dealing from the right-hand end of the wall, while you're shuffling the tiles, you can palm some jokers, and nobody's going to notice. And as you start, because everybody's talking, they're looking at each other while they're talking, while they're shuffling, and then you can just plant 4 jokers right there at the end of the wall. You're going to get the first 4 tiles. If you roll the dice, you have no idea where in that wall you're going to start picking.
Right, and some players say, well, we use 7, but if you're playing and you always use 7, then it's the same thing.
Same exact thing, yes.
Yeah, I loved your example on Sloperama where you dealt jokers to the players, and they were, so surprised to see them all there. We actually did an extended video where we dealt ourselves a heavenly hand, just an over-exaggeration of it.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
I just did that for a group out here in the Palm Desert. They asked me to come out and teach them some strategy. And I was standing by the players at the table, and I knew who was going to be the dealer, and so I stood at her right-hand side, and I said, "Be quiet, just go along with me." I don't know if you could hear me just now.
Yeah.
I said, "Go along with me," so I said, "Okay, now," and then they said, "Okay, so now what do we do?" And I said, "Okay, well, you're not going to roll dice because that's what you asked me, why. So I told the dealer, go ahead and start taking your tiles, and she did, and then I told the ladies, okay, well, never mind right now, just put up your tiles on the top of the rack, and she showed the 4 jokers, and they were all like, what? How did that happen? That's why you roll dice.
Yeah, when we did our video and Dara dealt it to herself, we got the same feedback and flack of, well, I wouldn't play with those people if they were cheating, and they were very upset about it. So, well,
Mahjong did originate in China in 1864, and it's sort of like when you're playing poker, you shuffle the cards, and then anybody that wants to cut the deck, they can cut the deck, right? Mm-hmm. Make sure that the dealer isn't dealing from the top or the bottom of whatever it is that cheating dealers can do. So, it's the Chinese built this into the rules that you're going to roll the dice. And in fact, there's a lot of different ways that dice rolling happens so that there's no cheating. people in China, they'll roll the dice. Everybody will roll the dice, and then one person rolls the dice, and then he rolls the dice a second time, and then everybody gets up and moves to different chairs, and then they roll the dice again. So, I mean, the idea is to make sure you've really got randomness going on there. And it's not anything about accusing people or not trusting people. It's just, this is the practice, you just do it.
So, you know,
how do you like my COVID hair? Isn't that
we
nice?
like it. We all have COVID hair. So I know on Sloperama you talked with Gladys about etiquette and stuff. So we just want to ask you, are there any pet peeves you have? Is there any etiquette you think is like very important in the game?
A thing I really dislike is a player who puts her hand over the rack, over her rack and into the middle of the table so that she can just reach real fast. I don't like the hand in the middle of the table like that.
Yep, we know some players like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and anyone interested, we did a post recently where we shared on Sloperama, if you search etiquette, I don't know if it was a list of 10 or 20 of top things that you don't or do want to do on the Mahjong table. It was very helpful. And it's interesting because some of the headlines, you're kind of like, well, why is that bad? But then when you read about what it is, you're like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, Michelle Frizzell said that is one of her pet peeves too. So you're in agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the main questions we get asked, before we go on, Susan wants to know if there are any other etiquette, someone calls it the claw. Are there any other etiquette things you want to share, any other pet peeves? or positives, things that you appreciate?
Well, so another pet peeve would be the person who always has to ask, you know, who threw that joker? Or, you know, is that a joker on top of your rack over there? I mean, I don't know. I guess maybe it's cataracts or something. I don't know what's going on there, but it's like people who just listen and don't watch. And one of the things about just listening is when somebody discards a joker, they're not necessarily saying joker when they discard it. And if you're paying attention and you're watching what's going on, then you're not disrupting the flow by having to ask people what's going on. Or at the end, when the winner tells you how much is owed, and then somebody says, who threw it? I'm just like, hello, she just told you how much you owe her, and you're asking who threw it.
Yes.
Or what hand did you win on after the tiles have all been thrown in?
But I think
Those drive me crazy. What's
a lot
that?
of the pet peeves kind of go to that it's a seeing and listening game. You know, you can't just do one or the other. So some of the comments we have is Judy's pet peeve is when you're east pushing the left tiles over to the left.
Oh, me too. I'm when I see my students doing that, I kind of yell at them. Yeah.
And then finger tapping. John Davis hates when people give a weather report on our hand, in their own hand.
Sharing information is terrible. Absolutely. And that's
one of my pet peeves, we don't really play with the bettor, but one of my pet peeves is if a bettor actually comments or makes facial expressions as they walk around, which is a no from the rules.
If I saw a bettor doing that, I would say your bet is invalid. You're not betting anymore.
So I'm just seeing how to move. Okay, so later we'll get to this maybe later, but how to move a slow player along.
You can't. Forget it. It's not going to happen.
Finger tapping doesn't work.
No.
Yeah, no, that doesn't work.
Let's see. I don't know if I want to ask this one. Somebody asked if you're Mr. Piano on Mahjong Time, but I think
I'm sorry, you were cutting out there.
Oh, somebody just asked if you're Mr. Piano on Mahjong Time, but I think you already told us you play on Shanghai.
I see that there now, and I have played on Mahjong Time, but I prefer to keep my screen name private.
I was just gonna say.
That's what we figured.
That's the same question that people ask, how many Mahjong sets do you have? And we're like, don't ask that. Nobody wants to tell.
I have over 80 Mahjong sets, if you count decks of cards.
All right.
So
wait, do you see this, Dara? Someone said, love the red dragon and the west wind. Each year I print your errata and take a pen to my book to update it. Will you be printing an updated book?
So here's the thing. In order to get the book updated, I would have to convince HarperCollins that it's needed. I can make a case for that, but I can't promise that they would want to do it. Also, I still have not yet earned out my advance on that book, so they may not be inclined to do that. I don't know. Last time that I talked to my agent, the one who negotiated the deal, she sounded kind of discouraging about the prospect. So what I might have to do is go to Tuttle or something, but Tuttle doesn't pay as much as HarperCollins did. So
Got it. So next topic, a lot of times some of our most important questions have been about improving play and strategy. What's the best ways to improve game? When you're teaching players and where you're teaching advanced players, what do you suggest about improving their game?
First off, I tell them play a lot and lose a lot and learn. Don't worry too much, don't obsess, just keep the flow going, the learning will come. You just, and I tell beginners, don't call every discard, because the first discard you call shapes the rest of your game and you probably just killed yourself.
Yeah. And that's one thing about, I feel this card this year, I think if you wait, it's a very flexible card. I think there's a lot of singles and pairs that transfer over to other hands. And you already answered, how do you get, so the next question was, how do you get somebody to improve their speed? And you already said you can't, so.
Not going to happen.
Right, right. It's funny with the online, because we had to pivot to online gaming and online tournaments and stuff. The biggest complaint that people have is if someone's not winning or get good tiles, they just leave. They just leave the game, and then you're stuck there, and then you're playing a bot.
That's poor online etiquette.
Right. That's a bad,
Yeah. Yeah, that's bad online etiquette.
Yeah.
So one of the strategy questions we just had from Sandy was, can you give a simple explanation as to why not to stop the Charleston all the time?
There's like a sort of like a double negative, not stopping.
Right, not to stop. So
there seem to be some players that just love to stop. They're indecisive and they just stop.
Okay, you can't change that person any more than you can speed up a slow player.
Right.
So the thing is that are you interested in stopping the Charleston yourself, but telling other people not to stop it, that you can't do.
That's true.
Yeah, I did play with one set of players that they had a house rule that you had to show the bettor that you only had 2 tiles to pass, or otherwise you couldn't. You could not stop it. You had to have.
I don't like strict house rules like that one.
Yeah.
I think that if I have 3 tiles that I can pass, but my hand is too good and I don't want to have to like break something up, I'm allowed to stop the Charleston. I wouldn't necessarily do that a lot, but anyway, I was just going to say I'm just looking for this thing on the bulletin board. And then I'll share
while
it.
you're looking, we had somebody say people don't always leave on purpose. They oftentimes lose the internet connection, which is true.
That's true.
Yeah.
So somebody asked me about decisions about stopping the Charleston. So I made this diagram here. Whoops. And but this is not even, a hard and fast thing. So, you're at the after the first left, and you're trying to decide whether to stop the Charleston or not, right? So here I made a little flow diagram for this, and it's on my bulletin board on Sloperama, and it's on November, a little bit from last November 10th. So that's there, if anybody wants to look at that.
That's great.
That's great.
Yeah. Okay. So we were just curious about you. We know you've traveled, you've played in many different countries, and we're just wondering if there was a favorite experience playing Mahjong, whatever type of Mahjong it was.
So, yeah, in my travels, I have mostly been playing, in my travels, I played mostly the Chinese competition rules. And my favorite story is about the time in Denmark, in Copenhagen, when I made the very rare 13 orphans hand. And I basically, having made that hand, I should have won that round at that table with those players. But there was a Japanese player at the table who wound up winning the round. Not an hour later or so, there was an announcement made that a player had been caught cheating and was kicked out of the tournament, and it had been that guy. So even though, and the way he did it was, while they were shuffling the tiles, he would take a couple of tiles out of the table, and he'd put them on his chair under his crotch, and he would be sitting there on some extra tiles, which he could just pull out anytime that he needed an extra, more, like having more tiles gave him an extra break. But he was caught at that. And so taking those tiles out of there, now nobody counts the tiles in everybody's walls, right? So nobody would miss like 2 tiles. But anyway, that was quite an experience.
That's great. It reminded me of, I don't know how many of the participants here tonight on our call watched Modern Family, but we shared on Modern Mahjong on our YouTube channel, we shared a video of, it was Mitch, I think it was Mitch playing, or, yeah. He was playing in Florida. One of the women he was playing with had a tile in her pocket. And as she's winning, she goes, Mahjong! And then it was so funny because they said, you wouldn't believe how much she's won for me, maybe, and you thought she was going to say some huge amount of money. And she said maybe $12 over the past year. So it's not a matter of cheating over the amount of money. It's just the fact that there's people that will do it. So
it was Cam.
Oh, it was Cam. It was Cam.
And it had to be in Florida, right? I mean.
Yes. So Bonnie was saying, what is your opinion on the loss of interest in playing with real tiles after the pandemic? Oh, I mean, interesting question, Bonnie. I'm not speaking for Tom, speaking for me. All my friends can't wait to get back.
Right.
Yeah.
She said her group wants to get together with iPads and play online together. That's interesting.
Well, here's the thing. The pandemic is being credited with changing everything. Once it's over, a lot of people are saying everything's going to be different after this. I think a lot of stuff is going to go back to being normal. I don't think everybody is going to keep on ordering takeout. I think people are going to want to go to restaurants again. I think people may want to go to movie theaters, although I don't know if there's going to be movie theaters anymore after this. But Mahjong, it's so much better with real people and real tiles. The real tiles are so much more fun to play with. There are things that the computer does well. The computer can verify a win. The computer can shuffle the tiles for you. You don't actually have to do all that, take all that time. But, you know, real tiles are so much more fun to play with, and real people are so much more fun to play with.
Yeah, what we've noticed is we have members of our community that actually take out their sets and just touch the tiles and just look at them. They can't
pictures, look at them, share pictures. And actually, speaking of which, because some of you we haven't met before, you're here to meet Tom. We have done on our YouTube channel, we've done a series called Virtual Vintage, and Barney, Carrie, Kay, Toby, Greg, we've had just absolutely beautiful sets, a sneak peek into their collections. And we have another one coming up in January. And it was just really something necessary for a lot of people who just miss seeing the real beauty of the tiles. So.
And part of it's the camaraderie. And we notice a lot of people, whether they're widowed or they live alone, and they just miss that interaction with other people. I mean, I know I do, and you know, Dara and I haven't played together since March. I mean, you
Yeah.
know, so
Good.
yeah.
So then our next question was, after, well, this actually kind of leads into that. After COVID is over, do you have any events planned on teaching?
No, I don't have any events planned. I have one plan, and that is after the spring semester is finished at my current job, I'm retiring and moving back to upstate New York so that I can be near my mother, who's 91. And she needs me to be near. I mean, I have two sisters. I have, nieces and nephews around, but by special request, I'm going to go be near my mom.
And does she play?
No, she doesn't play Mahjong. We play Upwards together, or when the niece and nephew and my sisters come over, we play various different games.
That's great. No, she's very lucky.
I grew up playing card games and board games in my family because, upstate New York, winter time, you got to have stuff to do. And I had no idea that playing all those games was preparing me for a career. Who knew?
So we've had
It's
some
great on your Sloperama website. I was showing my 16-year-old son that you have Schoolarama, and you actually give a lot of resources if you're interested in a career. And I thought it was great.
Yeah, well, I teach about the video game industry at USC, so.
Mm-hmm. So some of the comments we missed were that Sandy got a new set just after COVID and a new set the other day. She can't wait to play in real life and she misses the snacks. And Darren was saying how sometimes you can't use strategy as well online, which is true, because I do think that a lot of the game is kind of a poker tell. So yeah. One of the questions we had from when we asked people that we were having you as a guest, one of the questions was, what game theories apply to Mahjong?
Well, I'd like to back up a little bit to those people who've bought new sets. I totally recommend you make a big square. Let me go, I'm just going to go find the picture of that, and then I'll go share that screen. I'm just ordering new glasses, so let's see.
So while you're looking, you were asked where in upstate you're moving to. Toby Sock wanted to know.
Don't tell. He'll show up at your house.
I'm just trying to set up this.
And it's interesting, before we allowed everyone into the call, I just said to Tom, aren't you happy you're in California and not New York? Because there's a big snowstorm tonight. And going back to New York.
So a weird thing happened on my website that I still haven't wound up fixing just yet. And that is that my web host, Yahoo, has changed my website from HTTP to HTTPS, and some of my links on my website are broken. So I just tried to show this image and it wasn't showing up.
Gotcha.
But then I found it on another page. So let me go and share this. And then again, I got to move.
And the other one that you shared previously, the Charleston
yes.
one. I'm sorry, is the Charleston one that you shared, is that on Sloperama?
Yeah, he said it is, yeah.
Which one? The Charleston?
The Charleston, stopping the Charleston, yeah.
That's on the bulletin board.
It said bulletin board. Yeah.
Great, somebody.
Yeah, so if you've bought a new Mahjong set, you really need to make this. Take out all the tiles and make sure you've got all your cracks and bams and dots, and then you've got your winds and your dragons and only 8 flowers, not all of the flowers, just 8, and only 8 jokers. Make sure that you set up this big square. I call this I should call it the Great Square. That sounds more like the Great Wall, right?
Right.
Because new sets come with extra flowers and extra jokers. And if you didn't buy an American set, it might not even have the jokers.
Right. We've seen that where people had 16 flowers.
Yeah.
They play with them all.
I've had people
this first game?
I've had people invite me to their homes to teach them and their group, and then this happened at one house. They went and I went to their house and they had the set already set up on the table, and we tried to start doing some exercises with it, and then somebody said, well, there's a problem. What's going on with, and I said, let's turn all the tiles face up, let's make the big square. Turned out they had a whole bunch of extra flowers in there, and I said, okay, that's the problem.
Right.
So we had a question, if you've ever walked into one of the hidden Mahjong parlors, for example, in Flushing or China, and joined a game.
Hidden Mahjong parlors, well, and that said Flushing?
Somebody said in Flushing, New York.
Yeah, okay, so I've never been to Flushing. I have been to Manhattan and Queens and Bronx and Long Island, but I have not been to Flushing. I'm from farther west, upstate. But I have been in Chinatown here in Los Angeles, Little Tokyo here in Los Angeles. Little Tokyo is where I actually studied Japanese Mahjong, and I paid very heavy tuition to learn Japanese Mahjong because they don't play for nickels and dimes and quarters. And I have played in China and Hong Kong, so I have been to some of these parlors, yes.
So that was one of our next question was, what foreign countries have you visited and played and what style? And I know from Sloperama, you have been in China, the Netherlands, Copenhagen, South Korea, Tokyo. And we also actually have a customer in India. And she said you went to India and she met you and you taught her how to play American Mahjong.
Nice.
Which is
yes,
very cool.
I was invited to Mumbai,
yeah.
to speak to a women's club there. And they were playing basically British style Mahjong, but with a unique Mumbai twist. And so I had a learning experience as well as a teaching experience in Mumbai.
Yeah, she was thrilled to have met you.
Oh, well, that's very nice. When I was in Korea, I didn't actually play Mahjong there, but I did get a chance to play Go Stop on the arcade machine. So that's not played with Mahjong tiles though, so never mind.
So what styles of Mahjong did you play? Mostly Japanese and Chinese?
Chinese classical, I mean, Chinese competition rules is what I played in Denmark and the Netherlands and China. And even in Tokyo, I also played the Mahjong competition rules, but I've also played Japanese style in Japan, as well as here in Little Tokyo. I played American style Mahjong out on the Atlantic once. And I think that covers it.
We assume that a cruise, right?
Yeah.
And then we have our thoughts on it, but why do you think that it seems that outside of the US, it's very popular among men, where in the US, the stereotype is more that it's women play?
Actually, it's more complicated than that. In Japan and China, it's primarily a male game. It's gambling, and men get nasty while they're gambling, and you've got to be a very thick-skinned woman to be a female gambler. But there are definitely women who play in Japan and China, but it's a majority male thing, and the rules were all written by men. In Europe, it's couples who play. Back when I was a kid, it was families who played board games. Today, it's college students who play board games. In Europe, couples get together, they'll go over to the other family's house, and so now you got 4 people and you can play Mahjong. They were playing a variety of different Mahjong styles in Europe, and I think I kind of helped the European players learn about Japanese Mahjong, because those rules never existed in English until I was taught the rules in Little Tokyo here in Los Angeles. And so it's couples in Europe, and it's mostly men in China and Japan. I really can't, oh, and in Mumbai, that was women who are playing there. And I would say that British rules are probably mostly played by couples, men and women. Then there's another American game. The Wright-Patterson rules are played mostly by women because those were actually created by wives of military officers. The National Mahjong League rules were written by women. They took the original Mahjong concept and they kept the dice and the four walls, but they added racks and they added, well, they threw away the chow. So original Mahjong was very similar to Rummy, and in fact, Mahjong and Rummy were both created about the same time. And so the mid 1800s. And card game historians, and I have been in touch with card game historians, at least back in the news group days, and they're not sure whether, you know, Rummy or Mahjong came first. One surely inspired the other because there are so many similarities. And so, you know, in Rummy, you have a run where you can make like a 2, 3, 4 or a 4, 5, 6 in the same suit. In Mahjong, that's called a chow. And the ladies who created American style Mahjong threw that out. So it's, I think the fact that the rules were created by women is part of the reason why it's mostly women who play, but also American men are, you know, I was going to say racist pigs, but sexist pigs. And they like to, if they're going to play games, they want to play poker with the guys, and a lot of cigar smoke and alcohol and who knows what else, and foul language. I don't know what they do because I don't like poker. But anyway, so men.
Yeah, we've interviewed a bunch of men who play Ricci, and they go to competitions, and we've had a few different answers. But what's interesting, we found in the pictures, you can see cartoon characters, like they go to Comic-Cons, they're very into anime. And another guy said it attracts men because anime and manga. There's some TV shows where they so and the girls are like dressed provocatively in the cartoon. So he thinks that's why the men like it.
And also when we had Greg Swain speak at a few events here in Florida, she was saying how in other countries that the women are like models and they vote not only on their skill, but on their looks and their outfits. And so it's a whole other culture.
So interestingly, in Copenhagen, I met an American woman who was a professional player of Mahjong in Japan.
Oh, was her name Gemma?
That's Jen Bar. And Gemma is another one in that circle. Jen and Gemma were both in Las Vegas a few years ago when I went there for their big tournament that they had there. So I met Gemma in person only that time. But yeah, so, and they're big into anime, so Gemma is. And there are women who are into that stuff, but typically, you know, young women, 20s, 30s.
Yeah, the Ricci men we interviewed and spoke to, they all were the cigars and sitting around right there, and they travel.
And neon tables, just a very different board.
But you'll see in the back, they have Batman, Superman, you know, characters. It's just funny.
So when you're asked to talk about Mahjong, one of the questions we had on Facebook was, what is the most asked question you get about Mahjong?
Well, these days is, why won't the computer let me win?
It's a concealed hand.
I have no idea why the computer wouldn't let you win. You have to send me a screenshot and you have to tell me more information.
Yep, that's a good one.
We get, why didn't I win this hand? And usually they're playing last year's card.
Right.
And they didn't switch on the computer, on the online program of which year they're playing. So they were like, oh, shoot.
I've seen things like that. And I've seen things like, you know, well, they're trying to, maybe it was a concealed hand, or maybe they just don't understand the rules because they've never really played with real humans before.
Mm.
So one of the questions we just got in the chat was, how long should one game take? When you
15 minutes.
15?
10
When
to
you get to
15
know the
minutes.
people you're playing with, if they are constantly saying fast play, and then I guess this is about the internet, most of us miss the
Oh,
camaraderie of
on
getting.
the internet, yeah, so 10 minutes.
So in-person games are slower, just the whole passing of the tiles.
Well, 10 to 15 minutes is pretty standard around the world.
Sue just asked, what is your favorite style of play?
Japanese. Riichi Dora Mahjong.
And what's the reason that you like that the best?
It's just very exciting. And also I'm very much into Japan. I lived there for 7.5 months. 90, so 20, so 30 years ago. No, was it? Yes, 30 years ago. I first went to Japan in 1982 and just find it a fascinating country. I studied the language. I've never become fluent in it, but I just think it's interesting. I was playing locally here, and when the Mahjong parlor down in Little Tokyo was still open, but that's all closed down now. So I basically, anyway, it's an exciting, quicker game and higher stakes. Not that I enjoy losing money, but it's just exciting.
So on Mahjong Time, I thought it was very interesting. And until somebody shared a video on our community, I didn't understand why. A lot of times they'll tilt the tiles when you call it. Can you explain, and I think it's in Ricci, that you can't win on a tile that you threw? Is that in Ricci?
Okay, so there's there's a rule in Japanese style that if you once you have discarded a tile, and by the way, when you discard tiles in Japanese style Mahjong, though your discards are separate from everybody else's discards and they're lined up in order. So I call those orderly discards. And so the orderly discards lets you read how the game has progressed since the first discard until now. By taking a tile and turning it 90 degrees when you take a discard, that 90-degree turned tile indicates which player you took that discard from.
Wow.
And so you can read the table, you can see exactly who discarded what and when, and what they've claimed from who else. And so if you have claimed a tile that that you discarded yourself earlier, that's a dumb move, and you're not allowed to do that because the other player has a right to feel safe throwing that tile. That's the logic behind it, as far as I understand.
Now, I did a little lesson. I watched somebody who's in our Mahjong community talk about, but I thought the scoring was difficult. And somebody asked the question, is scoring difficult in Ricci? Do you find that?
Yes. Scoring is difficult in all forms except American.
So we had a question, a comment from Toby Salk. She said there's a Japanese Mahjong parlor in Berkeley with about 12 automatic tables.
Wow, that's a big one.
Yeah.
My question was going to be, do you like the automatic tables? Have you ever played?
Sure, why not?
Yeah, that's what I think.
And then Tony was wondering how high the stakes are in various countries.
Well, I can only tell you that it varies from table to table. You know, I learned a little bit of Filipino Mahjong from a coworker at Activision, and they played for dimes or pennies. And people playing in China, they might be playing for Chinese pennies. But Japanese Mahjong stakes are very high. When we were playing in Little Tokyo, I could lose hundreds of dollars, or I could I came away with over $100 a couple times, but that never made up for all the times I lost.
And then one of the questions we had from Joanne, which I think you answered, how many? Do you collect and display vintage sets?
I don't display my sets. I have a lot of sets, but I have a lot of different sets, and some of them are really weird. But I don't display them. I'm not Jim May, the guy that put up the first Mahjong museum online. It's too much work to do that. I'm probably going to be either selling my sets or donating them to the Museum of Play in Rochester, New York, where I'll be moving to after, well, sometime next year.
So what's I never heard of that. What else do they have at the Museum of Play?
Video games, toys, dolls, board games. It's a museum of play.
So Linda Fisher, who we interviewed before, and she does Mahjong in Bryant Park when there's games, she asked, do you know of anyone planning or developing a Mahjong game in virtual reality?
I don't know of anyone doing that. And hi, Linda.
Linda tried. I remember watching, right? Yeah. Linda was trying to do it. We know a lot of people developing online Mahjong games.
There's a lot of ones coming out.
Quite frequently, but you know, they've got to get on the ball if they're going to get them out, because there's a lot of competition right now. You know, well, somebody had asked previously, do you still have a list of Mahjong instructors on your website?
I took it down for the COVID pandemic.
Okay. All right. So do you miss travel with the pandemic?
I suppose there's a lot of things I miss. I'm actually kind of a hermit, so I'm not particularly unhappy overall. The biggest thing I miss when I'm teaching is not going to campus.
Right. They say you're talking to a dark screen most of the time, no feedback, you know.
Yeah.
Well, at the screen I'm looking at right now on Zoom, I'm seeing a lot of faces. When I'm teaching on Zoom at school, and most of those are blank. They're not showing me their faces. Yeah. I tell them they can either show their face or not. I don't care either way.
Yeah, my college son, they don't care if you're online. My other high school son, you have to be in a uniform. The computer has to be on a hard surface, and they have to see you. So.
Yeah, different instructors have different preferences.
Yeah.
So Toby asked, and she just clarified, is there any website that you know of that you could see everyone's hands, like that they're open so it could be used for teaching?
I have no knowledge of such a thing. There is a game, I think it's called Board Game Simulator. You can go and get that on Steam, I think, and I downloaded that and looked at that. It's made by some people who have no idea how Mahjong is actually played. And it doesn't have any jokers in the set either, as far as I recall, but you could, basically you can get that and you can put the tiles down. I mean, you can do that with if you've got a Mahjong set, you can just set up a card table and put the tiles on the table. And
so we've had a question from Leslie. She was wondering if you addressed whether you have what your relationship is with the Mahjong League, and that when answering questions, they've deferred to your site.
So I have a history with the league that started when I was at Activision working on Shanghai Second Dynasty. I contacted Ruth Unger, who was then the president of the league, to see if there wasn't some way that Activision couldn't cooperate with the league to release an American version of Mahjong that used the National Mahjong League card. We were not able to reach a deal. So I wound up creating a game that had an editor in it, and Judy's husband knows how to use the editor. You can basically program a new Mahjong card when it comes out. You can just program that in the game. Hey, there he is. And so that's what I wound up doing. But then I met Ruth in person when I went to Tokyo for the very first global-wide tournament of Mahjong. This was the introduction of Chinese competition Mahjong rules. And so I felt regretful that my conversations with Ruth hadn't been more productive and collegial. So I went up and gave her a little present and said hello, and we became friends. And she wanted to know, where's a good place here in Tokyo to find some toys, because I want to take back presents. And so we got a cab and I took her to the best toy store in the entire world, as far as I'm concerned. Although I guess there were some good ones in New York City and Manhattan. But this toy store in Ginza in Tokyo, I took her there. She was very pleased with that. I exchanged some letters and phone calls with her for, sometimes after that. And then before she died, there was a tournament in China, in Beijing, and her two sons, Larry and David, went to that tournament, so I got to know them. And that wasn't the only time that I've interacted with them in person. They also came to Los Angeles once. And anyway, then I think that they appreciated some of the things that I've written on my site, because I've seen some of the principles that I've talked about are now in newer versions of their rule book. And so I have, I think, a good relationship with them. Oh, I saw them one other time. I was passing through New York City on my way to see my family. And they picked me up at the airport, and we went to a restaurant and had lunch together. So I've had three or four in-person meetings with the heads of the league. That's that story that I'm sticking to.
We would hope, they said they wanted to be on the call. There's 100 people on, so I can't really look, but we were hoping they were going to be on.
Well, if you guys are here, hello, Larry, hello, David.
They're hard men to reach these days.
Actually, this really probably isn't a question for you, Tom, but probably for Larry and David. Jill was wondering if there's any reason the National Mahjong League hasn't created a downloadable card, which on my end, I would think that would just be too easy for it to be shared and not purchased, which they do a lot of charity by the purchase of the cards.
I think you're talking about opening up the door to enhanced piracy.
Right.
And they are a charitable organization, and what is it, a 501c3?
Yeah.
And they have rules. They need to make money for the charity, and the way they do it primarily is through the cards, but they also have, of course, those other goods that they sell in their online store.
Right.
I know the book that we mentioned that you're the author of, that's official Chinese and American. Do you know of any books, we had a question privately, books that explain the many different styles of Mahjong? Yeah,
so what was Scott, I'm blanking on his name. I met him in Las Vegas. So I've got the book listed in FAQ 3 on my website. There's Mahjong A to Zhu. That's the name of the book. A is, of course, the Roman letter A, and Zhu is just a Chinese character that starts with a Z if you Romanize it. But he wrote a book about all the different varieties. And it probably got some varieties that are not listed in my FAQ too.
You know those off the top of your head.
Very impressive.
So does the website take a lot of your time, updating and?
No, not. I need to spend more time updating it because, like I say, Yahoo kind of broke things. If I've got a link to my own site and it starts with an HTTP:, then that link is broken. So I'd have to go through all of the entire website and replace all HTTP: with HTTPS if Sloperama comes afterwards. And that's going to be a lot of work to do, so I haven't done that.
Right.
So if anybody has some last questions, we're trying to catch, we apologize if we miss some, but it's kind of hard for us to multitask with scrolling through the questions. If there's any we missed.
If not, I just want to remind people that we're still taking pre-orders for the 2021 National Mahjong League card. We are over double what we had last year already. The deadline is January 24th, 2021. If you order through us, the National Mahjong League is going to donate $2.50 per card to the Alzheimer's Association. So it's a wonderful thing. You order from us, we put in the order, they send the card and the bulletin directly to you, and money is raised for the Alzheimer's Association. So it's really a wonderful thing. We just want to remind people who are on here that we have a giveaway going on. It's going to end Friday at 11:59 p.m. You just guess the amount of these keychains we've made, commemorating 2021, the year of online Mahjong. If you guess the correct number, you can win one of these. So don't forget to try and guess by Friday at 11:59 p.m. So
we've had a lot of thank yous, wonderful time. Thanks for bringing Tom to us. Somebody asking if there's meetings here each Wednesday. It's not every Wednesday, but it's a lot of Wednesdays, and all of our events are on the events tab of modernmahjong.com.
I just wanted to tell Tom, I mean, you really have a wide audience. I mean, we have people from Florida, California, New Jersey, Detroit. We also have Paul from Ireland, Texas. So it's really incredible to see people from all over coming here.
Great.
It's a testament to you and Sloperama.com. And Darren and I want to see Sloperman come out soon.
Yes. And then, so do you, sorry to one last one, somebody asked if you have any idea of what the big hand is for next year. So do you feel like you can predict the hands on the card for some of them?
No, I never try and predict the card, but I predict that the most powerful hand on the card will still be there. It'll be in the alternate form. I predict that this is the 2020 card, the 2021 card, I predict it will be blue instead of red. And I predict that, and I predict that the top hand in consecutive runs will have the two pairs at the ends instead of at the beginning. And I predict that the consecutive run number 2, which this year is number 3, will be pung kong instead of pung pong kong kong. Those are my predictions.
We had some brilliant responses and appreciation of your sense of humor on your bulletin board from John Davis and from, I think it was Paul.
Paul, yeah. Mm-hmm. And we like that you put a mask on your website. We hope that's gone soon.
No, well, it's staying there until after I hear that, you know, the emergency is over.
Yes.
And I'm not getting this haircut until after I have a vaccine.
Well, I posted on
Maybe
Facebook.
2 vaccines.
My brother is a pulmonologist in Virginia, and his wife's a COVID unit nurse, and they got the first shot yesterday. They got the first Pfizer vaccine.
Excellent.
I am very excited because they have 5 children, and they have a very young baby at home, and I was very nervous about them. So they got it yesterday. And the next one, the second round is in 21 days. So.
And you've had a lot of appreciation on this chat room, Tom, just now for advocating the need to stay safe tonight and also on your website. So we appreciate that.
And John Davis says, try a man bun.
Nope. But I did see keep the long hair, and I might. We'll see.
We'll see what your mother says. It's up to what your mother says.
She's seen it. Her hair is about the same. I'll make a decision when, you know, it's time to make a decision.
Well, thank you all, and we hope to see you all soon. Join us on our upcoming Zooms and tournaments, and we're doing what we can to keep everybody connected during this time.
Yeah.
So we appreciate your time, Tom. We really, you really interesting conversation.
Thanks.
Yeah, it was
All right,
great.
play safe, stay healthy.
Thank you, and we could unmute everybody, and they could wave and say goodbye and thank you. We always laugh. This is our Brady Bunch goodbye.
I want to hear all those voices then.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye for a minute.
Nice to see you. everyone.
Thanks,
I
Tom.
love that.
Thanks.
Joy is on the Mahjong League and Ray.
Hi, Heidi.
Well,
Yeah, I'm trying.
thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye,
Leslie.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Have a great night.
Bye. Bye, Christine.
Take care,
Bye-bye.
Donna.
Bye, Sheila.
You'll be seeing me again.
Yes, we will. You're our biggest fan. There's Joy. Hi, Joy.
Hi.
That's great. I hope everyone enjoyed it.
Yes,
Good. Have a good night.
Great. Good luck.
very interesting. Thank you.
Okay.
It was
Thank you,
wonderful.
Tom.
Very different.
Thank you, Darren, Donna.
You're welcome.
Thank you.